Okay, everyone, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming to this town hall. You know, it's a busy season, so we're grateful that all of you could come out. My name is Katie Dunn. I'm just here to welcome you guys to the event, and then our moderator, Justin Jones from the Herbert Institute at UVU, will take over and be the moderator for this town hall. We just want to thank our partner, Silicon Slopes, for hosting us and letting us come to their beautiful headquarters. The PTA has also helped organize in the Utah Homebuilders Association, along with the Herbert Institute at UVU. So thanks to everyone, and thanks for coming. Remember to vote June 23rd. Primary elections are important. You can decide who to vote for here. And thanks, Justin.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful to be here. I just want to mention just quickly a little bit about the Herbert Institute. We're relatively new, actually. We started in 2022 officially, but when Governor Herbert left office in 21, we had been talking with him for several years about creating an institute at UVU to further civil dialogue at Utah Valley University. There wasn't an institution or center or department that actually owned this at UVU, which is the only institution that didn't have one in the state of Utah. And it was important to me and former Governor Gary Herbert that the next generation learn to talk about hard issues civilly. Obviously, we've been trying to do that and had a little hiccup last fall, but we're recovering and trying to continue to uphold the values of our community and making sure that we have opportunities for candidates and the community to speak on the issues that are important to all of us. What I think we'll do, partly because of technology, I couldn't see all the rules and all of this, but I think we'll give each of the candidates a couple minutes to introduce themselves, and then someone will hold up a sign if you get too verbose, okay? And just let you know, but we're gonna have a good conversation and make sure that at least the people in this room and others will have the opportunity to judge so they can vote for their preferred candidate in the next couple weeks. So that being said, we'll begin, and we didn't like roll dice or anything, so I'm gonna start actually with Kelly, if you'll start. I'm just gonna call you by your first names, and if that's all right. I'm Justin, you're Kelly, Brady. If you'll introduce yourselves and tell us why you want this seat, the Senate District 21 here in Utah County, which we all love.
Okay.
And then we'll go to you, Brady, after that.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Let's see. We're going to get the microphones on. Oh, it's on. There we go. Okay. Thanks for coming tonight and taking the time out of your schedules to come and do this. It's a lot of work to vet candidates, and so I appreciate when people will do that. I think one of the reasons that I'm running, well, I think I've made this one clear over these last 6 months, is local control. So things that we work on as cities and as schools and in families, I want those to be decisions that we make as close to home as possible. And so as a current city council member, and a former educator and a business owner, those are things where you're constantly thinking about state laws and how they affect your classroom and how they affect your business. And so I have been kind of the watchdog for my city council, as my other city council members are, for your property taxes. And we just notice that things that happen at the state can affect us at the local level. And so sometimes when we see cuts or changes, those don't always trickle down to us, or they do trickle down to us in a way that you wouldn't love for them to. And so those are things that I've been really concerned about, and things that I've been talking about on the campaign, and the things that I would like to focus on if I'm elected to the state Senate. So appreciate you. Thanks.
Brady.
So my name is Brady Brammer, and I've been in the Senate for 2 years, and I was in the House of Representatives for 6 years before that. By way of introduction, I grew up in Orem, Utah, and I then went to BYU, and I studied American Studies, followed by getting a law degree and a master's in public administration. And I practice as an attorney here in Lehi. Now, in terms of public service, I got involved because when I left BYU, I decided that I would serve in my community one way or another outside of church service, no matter what was going on. And so I've served on charitable boards, on the Primary Children's Planned Giving Committee, on the Great Outdoors Fund, their conservation group for environmental issues. I've served on planning commissions, and I've also, and then in my professional life, I have represented hundreds of municipalities and counties and about 100 different local agencies here and in California. So I'm very familiar with the local issues, and I've served on local commissions. You know, some of the things that I want to, the reason why I run is, first of all, citizens always come first. They come first before state, they come first before cities. And we have to fight to protect the citizens. And one of the important things that we have to keep in mind is the prosperity of our people precedes government revenue. And it doesn't go the other way around. And so we've made tax cuts each of the last 6 years, and we've really grown our economy to the point where we are receiving a 5x return on investment for every incremental tax cut, okay? So we've foregone about $1.5 billion in revenue and received about $7.5 billion as the economy has grown in government dollars, because our people's prosperity comes first. Thanks.
Thank you both. Thank you for that. Well, let's jump in. As I think I mentioned, but with the home builders, the PTA and Silicon Slopes and Grow the Flow, they've each submitted a series of questions about different topics. We'll talk about, no surprise, data centers. We'll talk about the environment, water. We're going to talk a little bit about open space and recreation, as well as transportation, and of course, education. So, and then if we have time, a few other topics, all right? So let's jump into data centers. I'm sure this is on everyone's mind. A lot of press lately with attention garnering, you know, widespread opposition to a data center up in Box Elder County. Tell me, and we'll start with you, Brady, and then move to you, Kelly, after that, and we'll give you about a minute for this. But tell me about your position on data centers, and as a senator for the Utah Senate, what would you do to improve the process for future projects, tax break considerations, rebates, and the role that the legislature plays in ensuring water and land resources are used effectively for things like that?
Yeah, thank you. So there's a few things with data centers. Now, traditionally, the data centers are not a new thing. They've been around for quite a while. We have a data center in Eagle Mountain. There's various other ones around, but they've always been handled on a local level. So you've got to decide if you really believe in local control or not. Now, there are some things on the state level that you do need to look at, and I don't think that the state should be picking winners and losers with regards to who gets to develop or not, which industries get to develop or not. That needs to be something that is that the state is agnostic towards. But the Box Elder one was interesting, number one, because it had a pretty crappy business model to try to do 40,000 acres at once. That's not a very good way to do it. Number two, it came in with a consumptive water use that was incredibly large. It was asking for 1,900 acre feet of water, which is a huge amount. The typical home uses about 0.45 acre feet, or at least that's what they ask for when a city is developing it. Now, if you change the technology, you can use far less water and it's less consumptive. So when they came back for their second round of permits, it was only 11 acre feet because they changed the design of everything. So when you're looking at data centers, typically it should be smaller and it should be local, but we have a pretty good system for state regulations to look at power consumption, water consumption, as well as pollution. And those go through our state agencies. And what you're seeing is this data center's plan is falling apart because they can't meet the regulatory framework that's already in place. And so typically local, but we do have state agencies that are checking on those things we already have state agencies that are checking on everything related to whether they're over-consuming resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly.
I think what people were most upset about with this data center was not necessarily do we need data centers or not. We definitely need some guardrails on what are we going to do with water and power, and we want people to meet those restrictions without favoritism. So if those are strict guidelines, then everybody needs to meet them, and we all know what we're talking about. I think what we saw with this that was the problem was the process. That's what caught people's attention, was how quickly it went through, how it really didn't seem like it was done in an open and transparent way, and that's what caught people's attention, and that's what we need to work on, is what are our guardrails for this, what are our processes, and then every one of them has to go through. If it's good for Utah, if we can figure out that it's good for Utah, it creates jobs, it maybe sends water back. I don't know if I agree with that, but let's say that it does. If we find that it's a benefit for us, then we can look at it like anything else. But the process has to be done well for people to trust it. And so I think that's where we really need to hone in a little bit.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, maybe a follow-up question. I mean, why do we need them in our neighborhood? Why is there so much attention to these data centers in your minds, and why is it important for us to pay attention as voters?
Okay. So there's a few things going on. Number one, there's a lot of antagonism towards AI and what its impact will be. And so already when you think data centers, you're thinking AI, and there's a level of fear and uncertainty with regards to that. Number two, they can have outsized impact on water, power, and pollution impacts. And so, we do need to pay attention to those, but we're balancing that against what is the private property right, and do we allow people to, are we going to say the same thing about, a manufacturing plant? Or are we going to say the same thing about Texas Instruments? They use a huge amount of water. They use and they're an outsized, they use a lot of resources, but they also bring a lot of jobs. And so, part of the issue with data centers is you hear these huge numbers and you worry that they're going to be abusive towards the natural resources that are surrounding the data center. And those are the things that you're looking at, but you're also not wanting to be a Luddite in the sense that you're going to, there used to be manufacturing plants, they were trying to shut those down because it would take the place of regular work. And we're not trying to do that. It does need to be agnostic towards the land use, other than what's the consumption of the resources related to that land use.
Excellent. Kelly?
Yeah, I think in a similar vein, we do need to have, we have specific rules for different industries. We absolutely already have that. And so we need to figure out, again, how does this benefit us? What does it take from us? And what's the balance of that, and how is it going to work for Utah? And I think for people, it's new. We don't understand it, and so we tend to fear things. And so I think the more we're able to get good data about what these data centers do and how they help us or what they provide for us, I think that would put people's mind at ease. But I do think that, again, if we can come up with a good process for how we do them, people can gain some confidence.
In this conversation on data centers, we've talked about water, and water is a huge issue, and multiple questions from all the organizations that submitted questions about water and water consumption. In fact, they quoted here that the legislative auditors ranked water as the state's top vulnerability, and large data centers, as we've mentioned, and are kind of stretching or pressing on that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the legislature's role in water management and meeting our water needs, and of course in a dry year like this? Tell us, and we'll start with you, Kelly, since we started with Brady last time. Tell us about your stance or position on water and water management, and how we can grow the flow of water, perhaps.
This is a really good example of how we can partner with each other as local governments. So I think it is the state's role to decide what our goal is. It affects all of us. Water is not something that just we can isolate to just one community. And so I think the state should set what our goals are and what we're trying to accomplish, and then partner with local communities and local residents on how they can be a part of the process. I think we need more investment in infrastructure and ways that we can use water more wisely, in ways that agriculture can use more water wisely. Those are things that we can do to start investing in getting more water to the lake, and then educating people that we are in this together. We can't do it individually. We can't just do it as cities. We have to do it as an entire state, and everybody has a part to play on where our water policy is and how we're going to be a part of the solution.
All right, could we follow up a little bit on that? Utah's second driest state in the country, and yet our water rates are some of the lowest in the country. Tell us about the pure economics of that. Go ahead, Brady.
So in terms of the pure economics, some of our water rates are supplemented by our property taxes as well. So the Central Utah Water Conservancy District and the other water conservancy districts throughout the state, they charge a property tax on top of your normal, school, city, and county property tax. And that funds a lot of the water infrastructure. And so the water rates, once you combine both of them, are a little bit different. And then we also separate between culinary and secondary water in certain communities. Sometimes it's combined. But we're not exactly charging a consumptive use as much as we probably should. And one of the economic principles that you have to take into account is what's called the tragedy of the commons. And it's the idea that people will overuse a resource that is offered for free until you put a price on it. And they will use it till it's gone. And so until we properly price water, we will not allow people to make the economic decision and the market decision that they need to make with regards to water, which is how much does using this water cost me? Now you need to make sure that it's affordable and that people can all have the water that they need, but we need to properly price our water so that it's paying for the infrastructure that's tied to it.
Great, Kelly, talk about.
This is one of the things that local cities do. So we've been working on this with the secondary water metering that the state asked us to do, mandated us to do, I will say. And we had some grants that came with that. I wouldn't say it's been the best partnership, but it's been a little bit closer than other mandates that have happened. But that's one thing that we have found as cities is the only thing that kept people from overwatering was rain. No incentives, no days that we would say they would just water more. So if it was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they would just water more on those days. And so our city has actually been one of the first ones. We're pretty small, so we did our tiered metering rates, and that has been very helpful. So for an entire year, we had an app, and we let people look at what they were using and showed them this is what this is going to cost you next year. And so we kind of gave them a ramp up. And so that's something that I think local governments have been able to really be helpful on, is setting these tiered rates and helping to basically slow the flow for people. When they get their bills, they get really interested in how much water they're using.
Yeah, agreed. Very good, very good. We've had several questions regarding open space, recreation access, and things like that. When we surveyed Silicon Slopes tech workers, access to outdoor recreation and wilderness open space ranked as the #1 reason people have moved here and stay here, above even pay. Northern Utah County is absorbing tens of thousands of new residents in our canyons, foothills, trails, and other things. What tools, funding, investment, canyon access management would you support or to protect what we love about Utah and its access and improve our experiences in the outdoors? And I think we go to Kelly this time. And if I mess up the order, just tell me, okay? Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
So our family really enjoys the outdoors. We do a lot of hiking, camping, all of those things. And I think one thing that we've noticed as we go around and we actually talk to some of the people that work at our national parks and in our local, like up the canyon and things, which is also a national park, but is that they're a little stretched thin. So whether that's nationally or that state, I don't think that we like to say we love open space, but I'm not sure we're investing enough in the people who need to keep those things running for us. And so we've got to kind of put our money where our mouth is. If our residents really do appreciate that, then it might cost more to go in. It might cost more to manage it. And so we've just got to make that balance on if we prioritize it, we have to pay for it.
Okay, thank you, Brady.
Yeah, so a few things that have been done. We allocated as part of our transportation funding $100 million every year that goes towards the development of trails, both inside and outside of cities. And so you're starting to see things like the Murdoch Canal Trail. That's one of the most popular trails around, and that received some of that money. And you have other trails similar to that. And we love our environment, but we've been, frankly, we've been loving it to death in terms of our trails and our outdoor recreation. And we have been allocating more and more money to it. And one of the things that you see is if you go to the state park versus you go to a federal park, the state parks are better staffed and they're better run and they're cleaner. Now the federal parks get more traffic because the big five get a whole lot of traffic. And that's become really tough on our search and rescue crews and everything like that. But one of the other things that we've done was we increased what is called our TRT funding, which is like the hotel tax. And so that's allowed us to capture and service a lot of those natural resource areas much better with the tourist dollars that come in because of it.
Excellent, thank you. So outdoor recreation, but also important environmentally, the Great Salt Lake is a huge topic of discussion. In fact, sometimes I'm like, why are we talking so much about the Great Salt Lake? We have a beautiful lake here in Utah County, you know, and it needs some help, right? How does Utah Lake factor into, or, well, first, talk about the Great Salt Lake, your thoughts, and second, how does Utah Lake factor into that? Because that's important to us, right? So we'll go with Brady. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Great Salt Lake is absolutely important, and you've seen a lot more resources directed towards the Great Salt Lake. But you've also seen a level of alarmism where they say there's all these problems, but they're not coming with the price tag of the solutions. And if you want to have actual environmental improvements, you have to start with what does this cost and what's the return on investment for every single item that you want to do with the lake. If you just start with the idea that the sky is falling and we must sacrifice everything to fix the problem environmentally, you're not going to make a lot of friends and you're not going to go very far with your solutions. But one of the solutions to the Great Salt Lake is Utah Lake. And I want to talk a little bit about what I've done on Utah Lake. So Utah Lake is part of the same watershed as the Great Salt Lake. You can't have a healthy Great Salt Lake without a healthy Utah Lake. And some of the things that we've done, number one, I created what's called the Utah Lake Authority. We were being funded with $300,000 a year prior to that. Last year, we had $14 million because the structure was done differently. We now have the cleanest lake that it's been in over 100 years, the healthiest lake that it's been in 100 years. This is the biggest environmental win through legislation that Utah County has ever had. And it's not even close. This is a huge win for our county. The trails are better, the marinas are better. They're getting funding that they never dreamed of. And it's because I changed the structure, because I knew how it all worked, and I knew how to make it happen, and I did.
Utah Lake.
Yeah, talking about the Great Salt Lake. I appreciate that we're talking about it. It feels a little bit like we're talking about it because the Olympics is coming. So I'm okay with whatever the impetus is. But I do think that we need a broad picture of what we're going to do, and then we've got to get down to the data on what that's going to take, and we've got to be able to present that to residents, and we've got to be able to kind of package it up for them and tell them this is where we really need it for just the health and safety of us, and this is what we can accomplish in this much time if we take these steps. And so I think having a measured approach that we can package out to people so that they can understand how we can work on that together. And I appreciate the work that the Utah Lake Authority has done. There's a great staff there. There are some great elected officials there. I won't discount the work that's been done. I know Brady and I disagree about everyone who sits on that lake board, and I feel like there could be a couple more cities who sit on that lake board and who should be there helping to make those decisions. And I think the more we have that, the more that we can make better progress. We've got more seats at the table.
Do you want to respond to that, or are you good?
Well, sure. You know,
30 seconds.
Creating a board is not the easiest of things, and if you go too big, it becomes ineffective. But I will say this, you know, the biggest one that we think needs to be on there is American Fork, and they will be, I think they'll be on within another month or two, because Genola will likely cycle off, and I think American Fork has the best chance of getting on, and that's really the seat that I think is the one that we want to get on because they have a marina.
Yeah, I live in American Fork, and I think that'd be great. I do think, sticking with Utah Lake a little bit further, but Utah Lake is experiencing unprecedented state and federal support, and I would agree the Utah Lake Authority is doing a masterful job. I think people don't know, actually, how great it actually has become, as was mentioned. How do you keep the legislature and other stakeholders invested in this momentum that's been created? And then how do we let our residents know that Utah Lake is an incredible resource? How do we do that? Let's start with Kelly. Thank you.
The Lake Authority has actually done some really fun things. I don't know if anybody loves Studio C like we do at our house, but they did a really fun commercial. And so I think that proactivity of just not just doing the work behind the scenes, but actually pushing it out to residents. Communication is a really big thing in any kind of government process. So we do a lot of work, but if our residents don't know it, they can't possibly buy in and be a part of it. So I think the events that they've been doing are really helpful. The information that they have on social media, if you go on, there's a lot of really great information on there. And then I think making it fun. And I also noticed that they engage on social media. So when people ask questions and they say the lake's dirty or there's lots of phragmites or those things, they actually take the time to come back on social media and educate people and let them know that might have been the lake a long time ago, but we've made a lot of progress. And so I think also having, there's going to be a nature center in Linden. So those sorts of things that draw people to the lake and educate them, and then they can go back to the community and let them know what there is to offer.
Which UVU is so excited to partner with that on the Utah Lake Resource Center and Education Center. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things you need to know is ever since I created the Utah Lake Authority, every single year, the state agencies have come to the legislature to kill it. Every single year. And every single year, I have had enough sway with my colleagues to save it. And I'm telling you, if that's one of the things that I don't know if it will survive if I'm gone, but I do know that, and that happens when you create something new and you need to get it to grow. But I think we're getting the momentum to where it's going to do well. And as far as how we get people to love the lake, this is a different thing than preserving a lake up in the mountains. This is a lake that will have over 1 million people within 5 miles of its border. And we need to make sure that it is hardened enough as a recreational point that people can truly enjoy it and love it for what it is, because the Lake Authority was built for a specific reason, to turn something that is an asset to our community away from being treated as a liability, to stop having it be that place down by the dump that smells funny, and instead be that place that we like to recreate on, because that's what it used to be. Saratoga Springs was a resort community, and so we can defend it and we can fight for it, and other people are catching the vision, and that's really having the effect that we need to make Utah Lake great.
Thank you, thank you. Let's shift to another really exciting topic, transportation. You've both mentioned that transportation is your district. In fact, we all know it's just getting here tonight from Orem is our most pressing problem. With an obvious focus on roads. And so that's important. We have a regional transportation plan that includes expanding options from getting from the west to the east, including even causeways and bridges through Utah Lake. Tell me about your support. Do you support a causeway? Do you support and then also the investment? What would you do to help invest in our transportation that's so desperately needed? And I think that's you. Yeah, is that right?
Okay, so as to the causeway, I don't know. But I do know that UDOT is doing a study right now as to the environmental impact and whether it is fiscally possible. And so I want to see what that study comes back as. I'm not offended by the idea of, I don't want something that interrupts the navigability of the lake. I don't think that's appropriate. And I wouldn't want something like that, but something that allows people to pass through the different sides of the lake. And that's required because of the type of water body it is. It's state sovereign land, which means you cannot cut off the navigability of the lake. It's a legal principle from the 1800s. But and so I want to see if it's viable or not. And we don't know. We just don't know if it is or not. As far as the transportation funding, you're just starting to see the impact. It takes 10 years to build a road. Okay? By the time you get it approved, it's 5 years till the funding hits, and then 5 years till the road's done. And so what you're seeing right now with 2100 and what you're seeing over the next 5 years with 1.5 billion hitting our northeast or northwest Utah County area in new road funding is what the Utah County Caucus, which I've been the lead of the Utah County Caucus both in the House and the Senate since my second year in the legislature. That's been the work that we've been doing to put together, and you're seeing that hit. And they just broke ground in 2100, 5 years after I started. because we got that road funding, and they're going to do all those other projects, and we're still going to be behind because we're growing fast. But we've got a lot of resources coming.
Great, Kelly, thanks.
So I sit on a board for the regional transportation, and we actually had a meeting just a little while ago, and just so you know what those look like, we lay out these giant maps, and we actually as cities talk about this road's going through our city to your city. What's that going to look like? It's going from a 4-lane road to a 2-lane road. And so we really dig down to the details, and it's a 55-year plan. And so I think that it has to start there with the people in your local government who know those roads, who drive them every day, and working with the other governments, because we pass through each other's areas. And so I think that's crucial, and that's being done right now. I think what happened to us is everyone knows we grew too fast, faster than anything we'd ever done before, and hard to really catch up. And so we're going to have to be making up that difference for a while with investment and with the work that we've got to do. For the causeway, we do just need the data. We've got to figure that out. It's not a simple solution. It's not a go across the lake in any place that's going to be quick and easy to do. So there's a lot to do with that. We are going to have to figure out how to get people from that west side, though. In one of those recent meetings that we had, we sadly had a really bad accident that happened, and a couple of those mayors struggled to get to where we were, and that is, it just shone a light on how desperate the situation is for out there. That's where the housing is. We've got to get the transportation to them, too, or we're going to also be hurting our housing availability.
Thank you. I mean, I-15 is our main street. I was stuck in that traffic, and I live in American Fork. Coming from Orem, like an hour and a half, it's never happened. But yet there's very few options. Vineyard Connector and all these others will be so wonderful once they're done. We've talked about roads, a connection across the lake perhaps, and others. But one of the things that especially Silicon Slopes employees wanted me to talk about is transit. Front Runner is great for north and south. It's sort of the I-15 of transit, but again, there's this east-west struggle, and especially in Utah County, I think we need to catch up on transit. I spent 10 years at UTA, so I totally get this, but I'm biased that way. I'm admitting my bias. But tell me about your thoughts on public transit and any investments that could happen to help, especially our North Utah County and Utah County in general. Your thoughts on that, Kelly. We'll go with you.
Okay. One thing I think we need to do is be a little more innovative, and we need to look at the uniqueness of the areas that we're doing. We can't do the same thing all the way across the state. And one thing that Utah County is doing, talking about working with local governments and county governments and state, they came up with something that I think is really exciting. They're doing kind of a last mile project. So it's similar to Uber. You would pay your $2.50, but it gets you from your house to the transit, because what we have trouble with is if you need to use Front Runner, often it's because you don't have a vehicle or you don't have a way to get to the transit station. And so they created this program where you can do that, and what that's also going to do for us is gather data. And so I think there's going to be 16 vans, and some of them will be wheelchair accessible. And that's going to cost us the same, they figured out, as one static bus route. And so we're going to be able to gather data. We're going to be able to get people where they need to go and see, is this the solution for these areas? So, for example, in Highland or in Cedar Hills, where we're not close to things like that. And so I think it gives us some really good opportunity to be creative and to figure out what's unique about the area where we're at and how can we solve that problem in a unique way.
Yeah, so we can't treat Utah County the same as Salt Lake County. I don't see tracks working in Utah County. The way that everything is set up, it doesn't work. So I don't view tracks as a viable solution. I also don't view BRT as having been particularly successful. It's pretty irritating to most people that have to drive on University Parkway. But I do like the program, the last mile program. And one of the other things that we see coming down the pike is automated vehicles. And we've created a framework, a legal framework, one of the first in the nation, to allow for automated vehicles to operate within Utah. And the reason why that matters is now you have an opportunity to solve the last mile problem at a much lower cost. And it is a future technology. And so I don't want to repeat what Kelly said, but this is one that takes off beyond that, where you can take that data that they gather, and now you can have an automated fleet that you can either pay into or that provides, if you're taking people to the hospital, if you can still have Front Runner as your backbone to go inter-county, but that intra-county travel, in the future, I anticipate it would be through automated vehicles. But for now, that last mile problem, really has not been effectively solved in Utah. And I think UTA's last mile program is a great one to try to attempt to do that, because buses have not been all that great overall. And so I don't know that we want to put too much emphasis on that, other than a few bus routes that really need to be going out to Eagle Mountain and back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Let's shift gears to education. Every year during the legislative session, we see a lot of education bills. I mean, we see a lot of bills anyway. I don't know how you read them all. But that being said, how do you feel the level of legislative involvement? Is it beneficial? And how do you balance that productive partnership with local school districts and parents and educators in helping manage our state's education strategy, our state's education? So I think, Brady, you're the first to answer this one.
So I generally don't like legislating in the education space. I think during the entire time I had one bill that was about how to close, like when a school district has to close a school, it cleaned up some issues that many parents felt were abusive towards them in the closure process, and it was ruining the teacher contracts. And so it staged the timeline for how to do that. And that was and I worked with the school district to get their input and feedback on that, and we passed that. But otherwise, I view my role in the legislature primarily as we fund education. That's it. We leave it to the state school board and the local school boards to manage education. But the benefit and the detriment of the legislature is that any legislator can open a bill file. And even if you don't agree with them opening it in that space, you still have to vote on it or deal with it. And so, I don't tend to run education bills, because I believe that until we truly empower our State Board of Education to make the decisions and to make the hard decisions, I generally feel like we're not going to be all rowing the same direction. And so I don't favor that many education bills. I just want to give the schools money and let them do their thing by and large.
That's how it should work. It doesn't work like that. And I'm not blaming one legislator, but it doesn't work like that. We get a lot of mandates for education. We get a lot of in your business for curriculum and how we think educators should behave and how we think parents should be able to do things in our schools. And so as much as that would be a dream for educators, that it was most things were decided on a local level with mostly parental involvement. I think our schools would be better off for it. I'd love to see any education dollars that come without strings, so that local communities can decide how impactful that money would be for them and where they need it. Is it class sizes? Is it curriculum? Is it teachers? Is it support staff? And so I would love to have the legislature write so many less education bills. But that also goes for how education gets funded. That's from bonds to lease revenue bonds. It's a whole bunch of other things that our legislators do a lot of, which is kind of control the purse strings and how school districts can do their job. And so I would love to see us get out of that business too.
Utah is consistently ranked among the strongest state economies in the nation, yet it remains, and we hear this all the time, at the bottom in per pupil funding for education. Parents and educators are also concerned about large class sizes, neurodiverse students, and they're getting the education they need, aging facilities, increased strain on school resources. Knowing that Utah's future workforce is part of our continued strong economy, tell us how you feel about the state's current level of investment in education, and what would you do for your educational priorities moving forward as a state senator?
I think it's great to talk about how much we're investing in education and how we're investing more and more every year. That's kind of how things work with inflation and students and more costs and things. But I think what we've really got to do is work harder at again that local control piece and letting people make those decisions. I can't say enough about how we are not doing enough. So we can say we're doing more, but if it wasn't enough in the first place, it's still not enough. And so if we're still at the bottom of per pupil funding, we're still at the bottom. So we've got to get us out of that last 10 We're at the bottom 10. We've been in the bottom. We're moving up a little bit. But that sometimes only means that our neighbors aren't doing enough either. So to compare us sometimes to what our neighbors are doing, if we're all slacking off, then we're still not looking that great. So I would like to see us do more investments, but I would love for it to come more from a state level for our WPU than that pressure that we put on our school districts for our property taxes. That is a regressive tax. It is very hard on our people who are on fixed incomes. So I would love to see more coming from the state, more coming from people who have income than from people who are having to do it on the backs of their property taxes.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what the point of this is. The point of our education is to have a good education. We're number 4 in the country on our education status. Number 4. U.S. News. And so do you want, and so is the point just to get more and more funds into education? Or is it to educate the children? What's your metric? What are you measuring by? And so let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing. Now, our teachers have gone from, in 2015, they were making somewhere around $46,000 per year on average. In 2025, it was $72,000 per year. That's the fastest increase in rankings. They were 43rd up to 18th in the nation. That's the fastest increase in rankings for any state in America as far as teacher pay. In fact, we are the highest paid teachers. We have the highest paid teachers of any state that touches our borders. In 2015, we had $4.3 billion in revenue for public education. And in 2025, it was 8.6. That's a 100% increase, and that's not just inflation. Inflation was 38% over those 10 years. Enrollment growth was 3.8%. That means we were 58% above inflation and enrollment growth. That's a really fast growth rate. But let's talk about how increases in income tax it actually increases the property tax, and I'm going to need a little bit more time to explain how that works. We have to, there's called a minimum basic levy. And had we kept the income tax high, that money that goes to education, as a percentile basis, if the local group wants to receive it, they have to increase theirs to receive their portion. And so that is the primary driver of increases in property tax. It has always been within 2 or 3% of 55 to 60% from the state, and then there's some from federal, and there's like 30% from local property taxes. But when you increase the income tax, or if you don't decrease the income tax, it puts pressure on the locals to increase their property tax even more, because they have to do it or else they don't get the money that's allocated to them.
Kelly, will you talk, we're going to give you another minute or so to talk more about funding, if you'd like to add more to that.
I would say that is the way it works, but it's not the way that it has to work. Plenty of other states do it differently. They don't put pressure on their cities for property tax, or their schools for property taxes. So that is the way that it works in Utah, but it doesn't have to work like that. We can change that. We can change that law that says that it has to work that way, where we have to increase increments to get more money back down. So we don't have to just say this is the way it works and it kind of stinks. We can actually change the structure on how it works. And I just feel like it should be coming more from income taxes where people are making income. I don't know how else to explain that to my people who are on fixed incomes when their home prices or their property taxes have gone up because their homes are worth more, but they're not making any more money. And these are the people that I have to see at Walmart and that I have to talk to on a regular basis, and they don't understand it. And so even if it's a structure that's complicated, it doesn't have to be that way. That's something that the state can control and they can change, and I'd be in favor of something that helped us to do that.
Okay, thank you. One more topic on education. Utah currently invests approximately $100 million annually into the Utah Fits All Scholarship Program. What principles should guide Utah's approach to school choice while balancing support for public schools, while also ensuring transparency and accountability of taxpayer dollars? Kelly, we'll start with you.
Well, we've had 4 children in our home, 2 boys and 2 girls, and we have homeschooled, we did charter school, we did private school, we did public school, we did online school. So with those 4 children, we had a lot of really great options, which I really appreciate about Utah, that we really care about having options for parents. And so I care about school choice and I care about parental choice. I don't feel like this is the program, though. for a couple of reasons. I think that it's too much money that we're doing. It's more than the WPU, so it's more than we're sending to public schools for students. And then the other thing I don't love is accountability. These are public dollars. Public dollars have to be treated the same. When you use public dollars, you have to have the same amount of accountability. For private schools, for example, they don't have to do nutrition or transportation. They don't have to take every child. They don't have to provide special ed services. So this is not apples to apples. And so we've got to be able to be accountable for the dollars. If you want to take them, we need to set one metric for accountability, and everyone has to meet it.
Great.
Yeah, so some of this is a philosophical decision of should those dollars follow the child, or should they go to the public school system? And that's the philosophical decision you have to have. Now, one of the things that I do like about the program is currently it is not coming out of the income tax fund. It's coming out of other funds. But additionally, it amounts to about 0.5% of what is spent in public education. And so it's a very, very small part of the budget. And part of the reason why that came about and why it had more support was because the Salt Lake City School District was incredibly abusive towards their students during COVID. And they shut down and they wouldn't come back, and they were the students that were most at risk, and they were on islands where they had nowhere else to go. There were no charter schools that were open, and they didn't have the technology to appear online, and they were suffering, and you can see that in the results of what happened to those students. And so having an alternative program that allowed them to go and find the fit for their child was very important. And we have found that those with disabilities and those with children with autism and that are on some kind of spectrum, those are the ones that take advantage of that program more than anyone else, and it's been incredibly successful for those students. And so it's a small program. It does need accountability. I agree with that. Some of the initial things that people spent money on, you learn and you adjust the policy and you tighten it down a little bit. But it's been a good program for those families that are using it, and it's grown every year as far as the demand for it. And so it is something that I do support.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time on education. It's important. This last session, the judiciary was a hot topic with discussions about the Supreme Court adding special court justices to the state. What are your thoughts about the judiciary? And do you think there's more work to be done on the part of the legislature? And we'll, I think, start with Brady. Yeah, so let's start with you. Thanks.
So in the last year, we've had some real problems with judges. In the last year, we had one judge that just was convicted of child molestation, and his co-conspirator actually appeared before him in court, and he helped him get off. That was in Box Elder County. We had another judge that was caught in a social media massage parlor issue. We had another judge that retired after he was accused of sexual misconduct and smoking marijuana with one of the attorneys in front of him. And we had another Supreme Court justice that just resigned rather than face an investigation over an affair with someone that was a litigator before her regularly. There's been some real problems with our judiciary. And so I wasn't in favor of expanding the Supreme Court. I met with the two justices yesterday and they're coming before the confirmation committee that I sit on tomorrow. They're both very well qualified. They're excellent. Jay Jorgensen is, Stephen Dent are both highly qualified for the job. And there's still things that we need to do, but we've invested a lot more resources to get more district court judges, court of appeal judges, and to really help the judiciary have the resources to become more transparent. They were the least transparent judiciary in America. And we had the least productive Supreme Court in America. And we've made changes to improve those, and they needed to be made.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, accountability is really important, and I think when we take these case studies, which are obviously things that needed to be taken care of, but what we don't want to do is color our entire judicial system, and we don't want to say that we've got to throw the baby out with the bathwater because we've had some bad actors. And I think as I've been talking to people, as I've been on the campaign trail, is there's starting to be not a lack of confidence in the judiciary, but in the legislature and in the way that they feel like they get to make all the decisions, and without that check and balance of, if the judiciary checks them, they tend to checkmate back. in a way that feels sometimes punitive and not cooperative and not really based on data and what's actually going on, but in a way that appears to people that they're being punished because they didn't do what the legislature wanted them to do. And checks and balances are really, really important. They're very important, and so we have to make sure that as we make those tweaks, we do not weaken another branch of government, and we do not pull power so much into one branch of government that the other two become ineffective.
Okay, thank you. Housing affordability. I have children who are becoming adults, hopefully, and will actually, move out. And yet it's difficult, right, for them to find a affordable place to live. What's the legislature's role in land use planning and the balance between, we've talked about separation of powers, but this principle of federalism, but actually state versus local control of land use planning, and how would you, and what would you do to help with housing affordability?
So I think as a state, we can make some overarching goals. So much of this is out of our control, which I think is what's just really frustrating for people. We don't control interest rates. We can't really control necessarily construction costs. Things that we would maybe step in and do would make us choose winners and losers. And so I think, especially as Republicans, we really care about the free market. So it's that balancing that with what can we actually do when we're in kind of a crisis that we've never seen before. This is really unprecedented growth all over the United States, and we're seeing it in a lot of places. I think this is, again, another way that we partner with local governments. We say, here's the overarching goal, here's what we're trying to accomplish. So little tiny cities, you come to the table and tell us what you can do. Large cities, you can do something different. And as long as we're all moving in the same direction, we can move the needle. We just had the legislature pass a law that says that we can build these little cottages behind our homes. And although I don't necessarily disagree with that, now local governments need to figure out how to process applications, how to enforce it, how to set regulations for it, what do we do about water and parking and all those other sorts of things. And so I think the more that we can work together on that, the quicker we can get to better solutions. And then we also have to realize that this is a really big moving target.
Thank you, Brady.
Yeah, so number one, I don't think the state should be involved in the local land use decisions. And there's been a couple of bills coming from the Cox administration to try to take over land use decisions and push that more up into the state administration. And I've worked to keep those bills in rules. I've worked to not allow those bills forward. Now, as far as the housing issue, I have 5 kids. I've got some twins that are graduating high school right now. And I would love for them to be able to buy a home somewhere nearby and visit with their grandkids, and I think everyone else does too. And I don't want them to have to wait until they're 40. But at the same time, we don't want to crater each of your net worth, because if we pop the bubble on your home and it craters, you all saw what happened in 2008. That's not what we want. It's a really disruptive thing for the economy and for your lives. And you start to have people losing their home because they're upside down and things like that. So you've got to deflate that balloon a little bit. So in May of 2023, we hit the high point for the median home sales price, and it was $675,000. Now, through a combination of increased housing supply and through higher interest rates, that price has come down to $575,000. And most of you haven't really noticed. At the same time, Utah is #1 in the nation in wage growth. So that means those that are down, that are earning their money, are earning more and more, while housing prices are coming down. And so we're getting more and more people able to afford, but we've got to keep that trajectory going and narrow that gap.
Thank you. SB 97 aimed to eliminate the 45% property tax break for rental properties owned by for-profit landlords, reserving the exemption solely for owner-occupied residencies. Where do you both stand on this specific approach to the property tax code, and do you think this issue should be considered in the next session?
So I think it's one of the tools worth proposing, and the reason why is one of the things that's driving our housing shortage has been the use of Airbnbs. So people buy an investment property and they rent it out on short-term rentals, things like that. I don't think you can, if you get rid of the 45% exemption right off the bat, you're creating a disruption event in the value of that home that is going to be very difficult for people to react to. And so if we were to go down that route, what you would be wanting to do is phase it in and choose the appropriate level, and you'd be able to measure it over time to see what the impact is on housing and whether it's making the difference that you want it to make. And so it is something worth considering, but it was the way that it was proposed on SB 97, it needed some adjustment, and I can't remember if we amended it to adjust a phase in or not. There's a lot of bills. I do read every one, and I have apps that help me. They highlight everything that changes in the code, and I do read every bill, but that is one of those things that has been driving our housing shortage, is the use of short-term rentals for single-family homes. And the other thing that I'd like to see more of is homeowner covenants, where the person who comes in can only rent it for 3 years before, and then they have to sell the home, or they have to be owner-occupied.
Well, with short-term rentals right now, you already have to pay that full property tax. So the only time you get that is if you put a full-time renter in your home. And so if we eliminate that, then what people who own homes will do is just pass it on to the renters. So we're not really going to be saving anything for anyone. It's still going to be very difficult. It's just we're going to pass it on to renters instead. And so there is a waiver that the state of Utah allows that if it's their primary residence as a renter and they don't own a home anywhere else, you can still get that 45% and you can pass that on. If it's a short-term rental, you already cannot get that, and you're going to pay the full property taxes. So I would not be in favor of changing that because I think it would affect our rental pool.
Okay, thank you both. We have this unique opportunity this summer, July 4th, to celebrate America's founding, America 250. This is more of a fun question. What are you doing yourself or your family to celebrate America 250 this summer?
Me first? So we'll do some of the traditional stuff, but the one that I'm pretty excited for, that I don't know that I've told my kids. I've got my 14-year-old son and my 18-year-old daughter. She just got her mission call to Cancun, Mexico, so she'll be leaving in August. But I haven't heard whether it's July 3rd or July 4th that we got the tickets, but we have tickets to a monster truck rally. And so we're pretty excited to go to an America event of monster truck rallies. They have Gravedigger, which is my favorite monster truck. So.
One thing I've been really excited about is that we've given funds to all of the cities to be able to have a celebration. So our city in Cedar Hills just had ours. We combined it with our family festival. I think each city is doing it in a unique way. So one thing we're doing as a family is going around to visit the cities, especially the ones in our Senate district, but also some further away ones, and just see how each city is uniquely celebrating. And we're really excited to see what everyone did with that amount of money and how their city decided to celebrate the United States. And I think that's that kind of is our country to me, is that unique flavor that we see in all of our local areas. So
I love that. Well, and I'm so excited for both of you to enjoy that, and for our community, frankly, to take a moment, regardless of politics, to celebrate really something that is remarkable. Let's take the last 2 minutes apiece to give some closing remarks and tell us why these voters should vote for each of you. And let's see, we started with Kelly, so we'll end. Is that right? Didn't we? We started with you. Let's go with Brady first, even though the question would have got it that way, and then we'll end that way. Is that right?
yeah.
So, one of the things that I talk a lot about is what are the things that are worth 3 cheers or not? And I talk about, that we have God and we have family, and we have those things that are worth 3 cheers. But then there's other things that are maybe, not worth as many cheers. And so what is the amount that we cheer for government? And why do we cheer for government? I don't think it's a 0 cheer. That would make us libertarians. And I don't think it's a 2 cheer. That would make us Democrats. It's a 1 cheer. And that makes us Republicans. There is a place for government. And one of the reasons why there's a place for government is because it's meant to protect the 3 cheer things like family and God. And so, what I'm trying to do is I want to maximize the prosperity for the citizens of Utah. And we've done that through incremental tax cuts each year. We've done that through protections of religious liberties. We've done that by decreasing the addictions in children's. I passed the strictest vaping law in America, and in the first year of implementation, it decreased vape sales by 66%. We have to protect the children and give them a chance moving forward. That means no addictions, no gambling, no vapes, no social media, no pornography, and so we want to maximize the prosperity of our families so that they can have income-producing jobs, so that they don't have pressure, the financial pressures that cause divorce. The two-parent household is the key. And we want to protect our children so that they get a real start. And that's through a good education, a well-funded education, within an economy that gives them the jobs to go somewhere once they get that education so that they can move into a house that they can afford. And that's what we're building towards. Thank you.
I'm going to do 3 cheers for the very last debate for Senate District 21. I am happy to be at 12 days, ready for this to be over. I think we both worked really hard to get our message out, to let people know who we are. And one of the really unique and kind of exciting things about this Senate election is that we haven't actually had an election where every registered Republican could vote on who their senator is since this Senate district was formed in 2021. So a lot more people are engaged this time, and a lot more people are going to be able to weigh in on who we want our next senator to be and what we want the future to look like. I like to give credit where credit is due. I love Utah. We're doing a lot of things really well, but I still think there are some places where we can improve, and I think process is a big one. I think trust is a really big one right now, and so we want legislators that are accountable. We want them to be transparent. We want them to be respectful. We want them to listen to us. That is what I've mostly found as I've gone to people's homes. I had a sweet lady as I was knocking doors let me into her home, which was wild, and she wanted to show me a huge project that she was working on, and she just wanted to talk to me. She didn't want me to talk to her. She wanted to talk to me about what her vision was for Senate District 21, and I think that's a muscle that I have been able to strengthen in local government. It is one that I feel really confident that I can do, that I can listen to constituents, I can take those local issues and those local thoughts and really be able to change legislation that makes sense for people on the boots on the ground. So.
Well, thank you. Please join me in giving these candidates a hand of thanks. And before everyone leaves, just remember to please fill out your mail-in ballots and take them to a drop box before the 23rd would be ideal. It's awesome. We'll do that. And we're so grateful for all of you. I have to say, it takes courage. I don't have the courage to throw my hat in the ring. I barely have the courage to do this, and not very well, as you've seen. But it takes courage to run, and we're grateful for these two candidates for their willingness to have the courage to step in, throw their hat in the ring, and run for office, and we wish you both the best of luck. Thank you.